Good evening, town meeting members. Ms. Shapiro and I will be here providing some background on the board's proposal for water and sewer rates and why the board asks for your support of this article. The Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund was established in 2003 and has always supported operations, maintenance, and capital improvement of the town's water, sewer, and stormwater drainage systems by the Water and Sewer Division of the DPW. As an enterprise fund, it operates on a fee-for-service basis, billing users based on their consumption, with any revenues in excess of expenses at the year end kept in the fund as retained earnings. With recent total annual budgets over $10 million, it represents about 7% of the town's total operational costs. Winchester has over 100 miles of water mains and pipes, 85 miles of sewer mains, and about the same amount of separate storm drainage pipes with manholes and the related components. The town also operates its own water treatment plant built in the Fells in 1996 at a cost of about $6.8 million that supplies almost half of our annual water needs. The rest of our water and all of the town's sewage service is through the MWRA, for which the town pays assessments of over $6 million annually. The Water and Sewer Division has 19 full-time staff, and the Enterprise Fund also pays debt service for water, sewer, and storm drainage projects. Some examples are the drainage project at Wildwood Road and the upcoming water project to rehabilitate the North Reservoir Dam. It also supports regular maintenance of storm drains and over 3,000 catch basins, water testing, and other requirements of the increasingly stringent federal EPA stormwater permit. This is a summary of the fund's major expense categories for fiscal 21, where you can see the MWRA assessment is the largest expenditure. Stormwater permit costs are broken out at $205,000, and the fiscal 21 total enterprise budget of $11.6 million. This chart shows the history of our annual MWRA assessments from 2008 to 2021. Assessments for both sewer, the top line, and water, the lower line, are moving upwards. They've grown substantially over this period. In the last 5 years, the combined assessments show an average 4.4% annual increase. So how are these operations and the MWRA assessments financed? The fund's primary source of revenue is from user bills. Quarterly bills charged for water and sewer at different rate tiers based on usage, with a surface charge of $5 per bill for administrative costs. Debt service for capital projects is a bit complex. The town shifts a portion to the annual tax bills according to a state law, Chapter 110, which is aligned with federal tax law, and then it's transferred to the enterprise fund to cover debt service. The fund's accumulated retained earnings, for many years used only for capital costs, has recently also become the source of support for growing permit compliance needs and other operational uses too. After the proposal for a stormwater fee was unsuccessful last November, the board and town management worked with the town's longstanding financial consultant, the Abrahams Group, to better understand the fund's overall financial position. As we said, the fund's primary source of support comes from user bills, and that revenue is variable and subject to weather patterns. This graph plots the rainfall during the months April through September in the blue bars and compares it to town water usage billed out, and that's the orange line. For example, in dry weather years, for example, 2015 and 16, revenues rose. Retained earnings reached $1.7 million in 2017. When rainfall is high, as it has been in the last few years, the blue bars to the right, billings tend to be lower. We're in a period of high rainfall, lower billings right now, and drawing upon those retained earnings. About the service charge. Town meeting first approved a service charge in 2007 as a mechanism to recover costs that do not vary with water sewer usage. That amount has never been updated. These fixed costs include administrative staffing of 3 full-time employees and portions of staff time at DPW, engineering, collector treasurer's office, and the controller. Reading 7,200 meters townwide via radio, processing about 28,000 bills, meter service and replacement. Our consultant's analysis, based on next year's budget, determined these costs currently exceed about $880,000. Town staff also contacted nearby communities to gather some comparative data, which was also reviewed by the consultant, and that's shown in this chart. This confirms the existing $20 per year service charge amount is well below other communities.
As you will see in the background of the article, the water and sewer billings are not keeping up with our expenses and needs to keep the water and sewer systems running properly. The town did not raise water and sewer rates in fiscal year 2019 and only 3.5% for fiscal year 20. Despite the 3.5% rate increase, water and sewer billings in fiscal year 2020 were down about 8% from fiscal year 2019's billings. Winchester is not alone. Many non-urban communities in the Commonwealth have seen similar decreases in consumption and billing in fiscal year 20 and are considering larger than normal rate increases to generate revenue and to replenish dwindling retained earnings. This spring was a relatively wet one, and fiscal year 20 consumption was the lowest it's been in 5 years. If you look at the average rainfall from April through September from 2017 to 2019, it was 26.2 inches. From 2014 to 2016, the average was 17.93 inches. When the spring is wet, outdoor water use and bills are significantly lower, resulting in a deficit like we see for fiscal year 21. Additionally, the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund has had to rely on retained earnings, and this is no longer sustainable. After fiscal year 20 expenditures, the projected FY20 deficit of over $400,000 and fiscal year 21 appropriations being voted on at this town meeting, the retained earnings will be depleted, and without significant action in the form of rate increases and an increase in the service charge, it will be very hard to rebuild. The fiscal year 21 budget shortfall is $1.3 million, and retained earnings cannot support this deficit. The recommended approach by the Select Board and town departments is to increase the water and sewer rates by 12% and increase the fixed service charge from $5 per bill to $30 per bill. As mentioned earlier, the predicament that we find ourselves in has been primarily caused by the fluctuation in water and sewer bills, given the rainy springs that we've had over the past few years. This has led to the depletion of the water and sewer retained earnings and is not sustainable. With large-scale projects, operating costs, and MS4 stormwater permit requirements, it is critical that the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund have a stable and predictable stream of revenue, which the increase in the service charge would accomplish. In addition, projections show a small surplus of FY 2021 with the recommended approach, which would be added to retained earnings at the end of the fiscal year. The alternative would be to fully deplete retained earnings and utilize a general fund free cash subsidy of over $1.3 million. So what does this mean for property owners? In the chart, you will see the quarterly water and sewer bills for average users. The bill amounts show the combined impact of the rate adjustment and service charge increase. The last column on the right shows the difference between existing bills and proposed level of increased bills. For the average residential user, the impact would be about $36 per bill or $144 per year. While we understand that this is a change and will impact many of our residents, the alternative is much more daunting. The alternative approach would be to use the remainder of retained earnings and use a free cash subsidy of over $1.3 million. This is a temporary fix at best. Without retained earnings, we would be in trouble should a large-scale emergency project come up. And decreasing the town's free cash position is an approach that is not recommended. Water and sewer retained earnings were certified at $1,081,534 as of July 1st, 2019. A portion of available retained earnings has been used during the current fiscal year for capital outlays and stormwater permit compliance, but also to support the operational budget. In total, over $700,000 of retained earnings have already been appropriated to fund FY 2020 expenditures and the projected FY 2020 deficit. Only about $333,000 of available retained earnings, or roughly 3% of annual operating costs, will remain. Additional appropriations being considered at this town meeting would bring the retained earnings down to 1.2% of budget. As a best practice, a retained earnings balance of at least 10% of annual operating costs is recommended. A healthy retained earnings balance allows an enterprise fund to manage an operating deficit due to a wet year and to handle unexpected large expenses and emergency projects. So our town is facing a very difficult situation. In order for our dedicated DPW water and sewer department to conduct business and take proper care of our systems, we need to find a way to no longer work at a deficit. The service charge, which is mentioned, would still be below neighboring communities and has not been adjusted in 13 years, and would allow the department to have a predictable, stable source of revenue. And the rate increase, which is lower than it would have been without the service charge increase, will help to offset the deficits that we are currently experiencing. While this is a more expensive option for property owners, the Select Board feels strongly that it will put our town in a better financial position going forward. We will be able to cover the water and sewer budget while also starting to rebuild the retained earnings that have been spent down over the past few years. The alternative would require a $1.3 million general fund subsidy, and while residents will not see an increase in their rates, the town will be in a precarious position with no retained earnings to rely on should a large or emergency project come up. So we hope that we can count on your support on this article. It was a massive effort driven by our amazing town staff to determine the best recommendation to mitigate the water and sewer deficits that we are faced with. On behalf of the entire Select Board, I'd like to give a shout out to Lisa Wong, Mark Toogood, Stacy Ward, Jay Gill, Leanne McGann, Beth Rudolph, Meg White, James Gibbons, and our consultant Matt Abrahams from the Abrahams Group. Thank you, and we look forward to hearing your vote.